How do we build a game plan? Great question. A lot of you probably watched the Road to Master series and you were like, dude, what's going on here? He picked up my main character and his combos were stinky, but like he climbed to master in like 2 days playing my main character. What the hell is going on, man? So first and foremost, I will say this. I have a lot of experience with the system of Street Fighter 6, and I have a lot of experience with fighting games as a whole. The way I learn characters now is much faster because I have more experience within the system. But the way I learn characters has always been the same, and it's the same system, like kind of thought process I've always done to learn a new character. The first thing that you should do when you're building a game plan is figure out how to control the ground and the air. In some games, that's different than others, right? Street Fighter is a game where there's no air block, and there's not that many ways to change your jump trajectory, right? So in a game like Street Fighter, controlling the air is a little bit more straightforward than some other games. If you're not able to control either airspace or ground space, like one of the two, if your opponent can just jump and get free pressure or approach on the ground and get free pressure against you, then there's no way for you to control the match at all. Like you can't interact with one of the things happening on the screen and you'll just lose because there's no consequences for them to just attack you on one of those two spaces. So how do you control the air? There's a couple of factors involved in that idea. The first thing I will say is find an anti-air that works, it's reliable, it's easy for you to do. Maybe you can't do uppercuts on reaction, like uppercut inputs very easily. Find a normal or something that works for your character that's consistent, right? Or an air to air or whatever it is. And also understand where your anti-airs hit. Sometimes anti-airs do not work if they're too far. Sometimes they don't work if you're too close, they go over your head. Find the range at which your anti-air works perfectly and understand that range and stand at that range. Second thing you need to do is find out how to control the ground. And to control the ground, you need to know two things. Your furthest poke and something that hits your opponent from far away. And in particular, in Street Fighter 6, you need to find your furthest or best special cancelable move. Any move that can be special canceled can be canceled in a drive rush, which means do pressure or combos or whatever you want off there. Step two is it means that you can cancel it into drive impact. And that means that your opponent cannot just drive impact you and then kill you for free. Those are your two first steps to playing any character in the game. After that, the improvements that you'll find in your play are figuring out whether your character is the one that wants to go attack, figuring out whether your character wants to be the defensive one, figuring out the ranges where you're supposed to stand, figuring out your win conditions, all those kinds of things. And you need to control those spaces on the screen. And I'll give you an example. My process for learning characters has not changed for a long time. This is exactly what I do in every game. Let's random. Perfect. To know if a move is special cancelable, you just hit the move and then cancel it into drive impact or a drive rush, right? So notice that this move, I cannot cancel into drive rush, but this move I can. This is my special cancelable move on the ground, right? Or this move is also special cancelable. The other thing is anti-air moves. So her anti-air is crouching heavy punch. The way you would test this is just set your opponent to do this. This game has that built into it. You can just go and set it to anti-air practice and click anti-air practice. The way I'm setting it is I have a button on my controller that is recording, and then I click start, and then I have my opponent jump, and then I end the recording and I play it back. That's it, right? So I can defend the air and I can defend the ground. Now that you know those two things, like what I want to hit if I'm on the ground and what I want to hit if my opponent's in the air, I'm able to play the game. You don't even need a fancy combo either. Even if this is like your combo or something, right? Like this gets you started. After that, every character in the game and every time you boot up any matchup in the game, you should ask yourself the following. Am I the attacker or am I the defender? And you don't have to be right or wrong about this. You should just ask yourself. With Kimberly, most of the time you're the attacker, which means you need to initiate against your opponent. Let's just go back and let's re-random and we'll make this question, okay? I'm always gonna be player one and we'll do some flashcards, okay? DJ versus Cammy. Am I the attacker or the defender in this matchup as DJ? I'm the defender. Cammy is gonna be trying to initiate against me. She's gonna be using dive kick. She's gonna be using spin knuckle. She's gonna be approaching me and trying to get by my fireballs. I need to like use my feints to try to make her spin knuckle or jump and then beat that option. JB versus, it's not gonna matter. Blanca, I'm the defender. I need to be watching out for Blanca ball through my ghost or slide or drive rush slide or whatever, jump. And I need to be careful about how I place things. So I'm the defender and I need to watch out for these things. Cammy versus Manon. Am I the attacker or defender? Could be either, actually. But I think generally I'm probably the attacker, right? As Cammy here. She's not going to be able to deal with my dive kicks always. I can force with my good movement speed, whip punisher, put the pressure on her a bit. You know, I'm probably gonna be attacking more than she is. Oh, I got DJ again. DJ versus DJ, I'm both. Rashid versus Jury, kind of balanced. I would say generally because of her good drive rush, she probably will attack me a little bit more than I'm gonna attack her. I'm watching out for drive rush, obviously. I'm watching out for her fireball to see if I can like eagle spike or make my way in or something like that. These are the things I'm watching out. You notice that every time I do this, all I have to do is think about my tools and their tools and what they can do and like what my character is capable of doing. Now, I have innate knowledge about the game because the game's been out for a while. But if you don't know the answer, it's okay. Just ask yourself every time you play a match, because every time you play a match, you'll know a little bit more. Another thing I want to teach, since we're on the topic of Kimberly and talking about game plans, to give you some simple advice on how to figure out where to stand. Figure out what your furthest range poke is, right? So like with Kimberly, it's probably her sweep, and stand in about that range. Like when I want to initiate, I want to go into that range, and figure out what your opponent's furthest range is. I want to stand right about the edge of this heavy kick range. My goal generally is going to be to stand outside of the range of their furthest poke and threaten with jump, drive rush, or whiff punishing. I'm gonna have Jamie walk back and forth, and at some point he's gonna hit sweep, right? Now, if I'm just following I mirror his movements, right? So when he walks forward, I walk backward. When he walks backwards, I walk forward. Notice that the whole time, right, I'm following him around the screen, and I'm trying to stand at the range where the sweep is not near me. This is what people are doing. When they're doing this, I know it looks like they're just like randomly doing this. The reality is you're trying to stand at the max range of whatever his poke is. Alternatively, when you're doing this dance, if you ever walk into your own poke's range, you can do your own poke. The other reason that this range is so important is that if he pokes and misses, I can whiff punish, right? If I'm in max range where his crouching heavy kick will miss, right, and he jumps, I can anti-air. This is why this range is so important. And you're like, well, how am I able to poke if my opponent's like move is too far? Just take a little step in. Or you take a little step in, take a little step back. You let them miss their poke and you sweep the leg. Or you step in, step out, and then you can jump. That same thing applies to the corner. If you stand under the timer in the corner, then your opponent's like when you want to anti-air your opponent, you're in the right range to do so. You just sit right here. You're like, what up? DIing is, it's one of those things that's like, it's good in isolation, but you don't want to do it too often. You want to be careful about just doing it over and over and over. And if you know that you do DI too much, then that's already a good sign, because that means you're thinking about your gameplay and you're like, wait a minute. You run into people online who do this a lot, who like, they're losing neutral and they're like, fuck it. And they just neutral jump in a DI or something. That might work a couple of times, but you have to understand that like, obviously it's not a long-term solution to winning neutral, because it's such a big gamble. It loses to like your opponent just doing any cancelable poke. It loses to your opponent just like doing nothing. If your opponent just set the all block, every time you DI, you spend 1 gauge, your opponent takes half a gauge on block, and then you're -3. And if your opponent counter DIs, you're like fucking dead. Your drive gauge gets its ass beat. Look at how much drive gauge you lose if you get counter DI'd, right? So you spent 1, then you lose a whole other one right on the start of the combo, and that's assuming like, you know, that they don't spend any gauge or anything. They can just combo into level 3, and then now look at your drive gauge. Look at Chun-Li's drive gauge. She started with full drive gauge, and now she's like at like 2.5 from doing a DI at full gauge. How do I stop ending up in the corner with Guile? Probably fight for your space more rather than just walking back and throwing boom. You can do this. You don't have to like walk back the whole time, and you can always drive rush in behind your boom. Good corner pressure usually is, yeah, light or something, right? Because light generally is pretty safe to most of the stuff your opponent's gonna want to do. The solid game plan to get out of the corner is just walk and block. Like if I'm stuck in the corner, like walk out. If you're in this range, jump out is very good because your opponent is unable to anti-air you easily, right? So like jumping at this range is good. You figured out how to cover the ground and you figured out how to cover the air. The way to improve your game plan is to start getting more comfortable with different ranges. Ask yourself what your opponent's character wants to do and form more complicated answers. I want to poke with this a lot, and what this is going to do is make my opponent like step backwards to try and like beat my crouching medium kick, right? So now if I make Jamie walk backwards, then I can start booming him because he's walking away from me. And then once he starts walking forward again to try to like cover space from boom, then you can crouching medium kick. If he's running away, shouldn't you take the space he gives up? You can, but also if you're Guile, then this is taking space, right? This gives me space.
Listen.
Yeah, I mean, if they're empty jumping to beat your perfect parry, then like you just do something else, like fuzzy jab. If you're like, dude, if he does X, then I have to do Y, and if I do Y, he can do Z, and if I do Z, then he can do. Then like you should just spend $400 and cheat, because yeah, fighting games. The cool part about them is that there's solutions, right? Like there's a rotation of options. If he tries to adapt to you, then you can adapt to them, and then you know you just switch things up, and everything's cool. If this just loses to X or Y, then like yeah, I mean, it does.